My stepmother said I'd never be part of the real family, so I made sure she'd never be part of it either. I was 17 when my dad remarried, and from day one, she made it crystal clear that I was nothing more than an unwanted leftover from his previous life. The woman moved into our house like she owned it, rearranging everything my mom had carefully chosen, throwing away family photos, and acting like I was some kind of burden that came with the package deal. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments about how I ate too much, took up too much space, and how things would be so much easier if it was just her and Dad. The breaking point came during Christmas dinner when she announced to the entire extended family that I wasn't really part of the real family anyway, just a reminder of Dad's past mistakes. I remember sitting at that table, fork halfway to my mouth, watching all these relatives I'd known my whole life suddenly avoid eye contact. My dad just sat there, not saying a word, cutting his ham like nothing happened. That's when something inside me snapped, and I realized I wasn't going to take this anymore. I started planning that very night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how she'd systematically tried to erase me from what used to be my home. She wanted to play the family game. Fine. I'd show her exactly what family loyalty looked like. The weeks following that Christmas dinner felt like living in a war zone where only one side knew they were fighting. She continued her campaign of making me feel invisible, commenting on how much food I consumed, how loud I walked up the stairs, how my music was always too loud even when I wore headphones. She'd rearrange my bathroom supplies, move my favorite snacks to places I couldn't reach, and somehow always managed to use up all the hot water before I needed to shower for school. Dad remained completely oblivious, too wrapped up in his new marriage to notice how miserable his only daughter had become. I started keeping a detailed journal of every slight, every cruel comment, every way she tried to make me feel unwelcome in my own home. Writing it all down made me realize just how calculated her behavior was. She wasn't just being thoughtless or adjusting to a new living situation. She was actively trying to drive me away. The pattern became clear when I tracked her actions over several weeks. Whenever Dad was home, she'd be sweet and accommodating, asking about my day and offering to help with homework. The moment he left for work or went out with friends, she'd transform into someone completely different. My first move was subtle but devastating. I started documenting everything she did wrong around the house. Every time she left dirty dishes in the sink, forgot to do laundry, or spent Dad's money on unnecessary things, I'd take photos and screenshots. I created a whole folder on my phone, filled with evidence of her laziness and financial irresponsibility. She thought she was so clever, acting like the perfect wife when Dad was around, but I was watching her every move. The woman would order expensive skincare products online, hide shopping bags in the garage, and then lie about where the money went. I had proof of everything. I began strategically leaving evidence where Dad would find it receipts for expensive purchases tucked between magazines he read. Empty boxes from luxury items she'd claimed were gifts from friends visible in the recycling. I'd casually mention how tired she looked, suggesting maybe she was working too hard when I knew she'd spent the entire day shopping and getting her nails done. The beauty of my approach was that I never directly accused her of anything. I just created situations where Dad would discover the truth himself, making him feel like he was the one uncovering her deceptions. Her spending habits were absolutely outrageous, and I made sure to document every single purchase. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, spa treatments, premium cosmetics. She was burning through Dad's savings like it was her personal allowance. I started taking photos of price tags, saving screenshots of her online shopping carts when she left her laptop open, and even recording her phone conversations with friends where she bragged about how easy it was to get money out of Dad. The woman had no shame, talking about him like he was just an ATM she'd figured out how to access. But then my aunt showed up for an unexpected visit, and everything changed completely. She'd always been my mom's best friend, and seeing how this woman had completely transformed our house made her furious. My aunt pulled me aside and told me she'd never liked my stepmother, that something felt off about her from the beginning. She suggested we do some digging into her background, maybe find out what she was really about. I'd never thought about investigating someone's past, but my aunt had connections and knew how to find information. We spent the next week going through social media profiles, public records, and even contacting people from her previous jobs. My aunt turned out to be incredibly resourceful when it came to uncovering information. She had friends who worked in various industries and knew how to access public records that I'd never even heard of. We started with basic social media searches, but quickly moved into more sophisticated investigations. She showed me how to use LinkedIn to track employment history, how to search court records for civil cases, and even how to find property ownership information. It was like learning a whole new skill set, and I was fascinated by how much information about people was actually available if you knew where to look. What we discovered during our investigation was absolutely shocking. She'd been married twice before, and both marriages had ended badly because of her manipulative behavior. We found old Facebook posts where her ex-husband's families were warning people about her, describing exactly the same pattern of behavior she was showing with us. She'd move in, take over, isolate the man from his family, and then drain his bank accounts. My aunt found court documents showing she'd been sued for theft by her previous employer, and there were multiple complaints about her lying and stealing from coworkers. I couldn't believe Dad had never bothered to check any of this before marrying her. The deeper we dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. Her first marriage had lasted only 18 months, ending when her husband discovered she'd been forging his signature on checks and had run up massive credit card debt in his name. The second marriage lasted a bit longer, but ended similarly when she was caught stealing jewelry from her mother-in-law and selling it online. There were police reports, restraining orders, and even a criminal charge for fraud that had been dropped when she agreed to pay restitution. This woman was a professional con artist, and my father was just her latest mark. Armed with this information, I felt like I had real power for the first time in months. But I knew I had to be strategic about how I used it. I started by casually mentioning some of the things I'd discovered to my dad, framing it like I'd accidentally stumbled across information online. I'd say things like how weird it was that she never talked about her past, or how strange it seemed that she didn't have any long-term friends. Dad would get defensive at first, but I could see the seeds of doubt starting to grow in his mind. Meanwhile, I kept collecting evidence of her current behavior, building a case that would be impossible to ignore. I became obsessed with gathering evidence, spending hours each day documenting her lies and inconsistencies. I'd screenshot her social media posts where she claimed to be at work when I knew she was actually shopping or getting beauty treatments. I recorded conversations where she lied about where she'd been or what she'd spent money on. I even started checking the mileage on her car to verify whether her stories about where she'd driven matched reality. The woman was so careless with her lies that it was almost too easy to catch her in contradictions. The most damaging evidence came from her own social media activity. She was constantly posting photos of expensive meals, luxury items, and spa treatments, all while telling Dad she was being careful with money and trying to save for their future. She'd post pictures of designer shoes with captions about treating herself, then come home and tell Dad she'd found them at a discount store. I screenshot everything, creating a comprehensive timeline of her lies that would be impossible to explain away. She was essentially creating her own evidence against herself, too narcissistic to realize how her online behavior contradicted her stories. But then my best friend got involved, and she brought a whole new level of detective work to our investigation. She was taking computer science classes and knew how to access information that I'd never even considered. She showed me how to use reverse image searches to verify whether photos were actually taken where she claimed, how to track location data from social media posts, and even how to find deleted posts and comments using cached versions of websites. My friend was like a digital forensics expert, and she was just as invested in exposing my stepmother as I was. Together, we uncovered a whole network of lies that went far beyond just financial deception. She'd been telling people at her yoga studio that she was a widow, claiming my dad was her first husband and that she'd never been married before. She'd created an entire fictional backstory about her previous life, complete with fake stories about a career she'd never had and achievements she'd never earned. The woman was living multiple lives, telling different lies to different groups of people, never expecting that anyone would connect the dots. The breakthrough came when I discovered she was having an affair with someone from her yoga class. I'd been tracking her movements using the family location sharing app, and noticed she was going to places that didn't match her stories about where she'd been. One day, I followed her to a coffee shop across town, and there she was, all over some guy who definitely wasn't my father. I took photos and videos, my hands shaking with excitement and rage. This was it, the evidence that would finally expose her for what she really was. But I knew I had to be smart about how I revealed this information, timing it for maximum impact. Following her became a regular activity, and I discovered that her affair was far more serious than just casual meetings. They were spending entire afternoons together, going to hotels, expensive restaurants, and even shopping for jewelry together. I watched through restaurant windows as she tried on rings and necklaces, letting this man buy her gifts while she was living off my father's money. The audacity was breathtaking. She was essentially funding her affair with Dad's credit cards, using the money he earned to finance her betrayal of their marriage. I managed to get photos of them together in compromising situations, videos of them kissing and holding hands, and even recordings of their phone conversations when she thought nobody was listening. The affair partner turned out to be married too, which added another layer of complexity to the situation. I debated whether to contact his wife, but decided to focus on exposing my stepmother first. I needed to be strategic about how I revealed this information, making sure it would have the maximum impact on her relationship with Dad. The most devastating piece of evidence came when I overheard her talking to her lover about her plans for the future. She was planning to divorce Dad as soon as she could claim a significant portion of his assets, then move in with her affair partner who apparently had even more money. She talked about Dad like he was just a temporary convenience, someone she was using until she could upgrade to a better situation. Listening to her casual discussion of destroying my father's life made me realize just how dangerous this woman really was. I decided to wait until Dad's birthday party, when all his friends and family would be there. I'd prepared a whole presentation on my laptop, disguised as a slideshow of family memories. I started with normal photos, then gradually transitioned into the evidence I'd collected, the financial records, the background information, and finally the photos of her with the other man. The room went completely silent as everyone realized what they were seeing. My stepmother's face went white, then red. Then she started screaming about how I was a manipulative little troublemaker who'd been planning this all along. She wasn't wrong, but nobody cared about her side of the story anymore. The reaction from Dad's friends and family was immediate and intense. People started sharing their own suspicions and concerns that they'd been too polite to voice before. My uncle mentioned that he'd always thought her stories didn't add up, and Dad's best friend admitted he'd tried to warn Dad about her behavior, but had been brushed off. Everyone had noticed red flags, but nobody had wanted to interfere in Dad's happiness. Now that the truth was out, they felt comfortable sharing their observations and concerns. Dad was devastated, but also furious that he'd been played so completely. The divorce proceedings started immediately, and thanks to all the evidence I'd collected, she didn't get a penny of his money or any claim to our house. She tried to turn everyone against me, calling me vindictive and cruel, but the damage was done. Everyone could see exactly what kind of person she really was, and how she'd been manipulating the entire family. My relatives, who'd been cold to me after her Christmas declaration, suddenly rallied around me, apologizing for not seeing through her act sooner. The legal proceedings were incredibly satisfying to watch unfold. Dad's lawyer was amazed by the quality and quantity of evidence I'd gathered, saying it was better than what most private investigators could have produced. Every lie she'd told was documented, every financial deception was proven with receipts and bank records, and her affair was captured in vivid detail. She tried to claim that I'd somehow fabricated or manipulated the evidence, but there was simply too much of it from too many different sources for that to be believable. Her attempts to fight the divorce were pathetic and desperate. She hired a lawyer who clearly didn't understand the strength of the case against her, and they kept making arguments that were easily demolished by the evidence I'd collected. She tried to claim she deserved compensation for the emotional distress of being investigated and exposed. But that backfired when her lawyer had to admit that all the evidence against her was legitimate. The court proceedings became a public humiliation for her, with every detail of her deception and betrayal laid out for everyone to see. But the story didn't end with the divorce. My stepmother's affair partner's wife had somehow gotten wind of the situation, and she reached out to me through social media. She wanted copies of the evidence I'd gathered about their affair, planning to use it in her own divorce proceedings. I was happy to share everything I had, feeling like I was helping another woman escape from a manipulative situation. It turned out that her husband had been cheating with multiple women, and my stepmother was just the latest in a long line of affairs. The final twist came 6 months later when she tried to come back, begging Dad to take her back and promising she'd changed. She sent him long emails about how much she missed our family, how she'd made mistakes but learned from them. But I'd been monitoring her social media accounts, and I knew she'd already moved on to targeting another divorced man with money. I showed Dad the photos of her with her new victim, and he finally understood that everything about her had been a lie from the beginning. She'd never cared about our family. We were just marks in her ongoing con game. Her new target was a widower she'd met at a grief support group, which showed just how calculating and predatory she really was. She was using the same techniques, the same manipulative tactics, the same lies about her past. I felt obligated to warn him, so I created an anonymous email account and sent him copies of all the evidence I'd gathered about her previous marriages and criminal history. I included photos of her, with her affair partner, and documentation of her financial crimes. I never found out if he believed the information or not, but I'd done what I could to protect an innocent person from becoming her next victim. The experience of exposing my stepmother taught me valuable lessons about trust, family loyalty, and the importance of standing up for yourself when someone tries to manipulate or abuse you. I learned that some people are genuinely predatory, viewing others as resources to be exploited rather than human beings deserving of respect and love. I also learned that sometimes the adults in your life won't protect you, and you have to be prepared to protect yourself using whatever tools and resources you have available. Now our house feels like home again, with Dad and me rebuilding the relationship that she'd tried so hard to destroy. He's apologized countless times for not protecting me, for letting her make me feel unwanted in my own home. We've restored all the family photos she'd hidden away, and slowly but surely, we're healing from the damage she caused. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far in my revenge, but then I remember how she looked at me that Christmas day, how she tried to erase me from the only family I had left. She wanted to play games with family loyalty, and I played better than she ever could have imagined. The whole experience changed how I view relationships and trust. I'm much more cautious now about people who seem too good to be true or who try to rush into intimate relationships without sharing details about their past. I've learned to recognize the warning signs of manipulative behavior, and I'm not afraid to do research or ask questions when something doesn't feel right. My stepmother taught me that some people are professional liars, and that protecting yourself and your family sometimes requires taking action that others might view as extreme or vindictive.